Joining us, and I've seen her on here, is Dr. Rosalind Osgood, school board member, District 5. We're going to be joined by the David Watkins, the Broward County Public Schools Office of Equity and Diversity. He's the director. Children's Services Counselor, Cindy Arenberg Seltzer, and the UNCF, we have Haki, Halisi, and then Rudy Jean Bart of Broward College. Thank you so much for joining us. As we look at this this graphic here, we're talking about Broward graduation rates. As we can see, there is a disparity in that. As a mentor in the Broward County schools, I know that, this is always an important topic of conversation as we work to prepare our children in schools and for beyond. So let me get started with Dr. Rosalind Osgood. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful, thank you. And it's so good to be here today. Thank you to the MLK committee for your continued leadership and work in our community. And as we talk about schools and disparities, it's nothing new. It has been ongoing. We started with separate but equal, and then we got integration, and we continue to fight. I am a supporter of Broward School Superintendent Robert Runcie because of the results that the school district has gotten under his leadership when it comes to dealing with racial disparities. So right now we have a 10% achievement gap in the graduation rate with Black students and white students. When Mr. Runcie came in 2010 to 2011, that gap was 20%. So we continue to work very hard to close the achievement gap by making sure that we are giving opportunities for kids of color to participate in AP and honors courses, that we're making sure that they have a lot of the resources that they need. And over the last couple of years, and Mr. Watkins leads this work, we've been doing a lot of equity work. But I will say to you today, as your District 5 school board member and as the chair of the school board, that's not enough. Equity means equal opportunities. But what we have to do is level up and get serious about dealing with racism. We have to hold our school districts accountable, our organizations and structures, and make them put into policy a commitment to become anti-racist school districts, where we talk about anti-racism, because equity will get us equal opportunities. But anti-racism work and changing school climate will get us equal outcomes. And I think that's the larger discussion that we have to have. Opportunities is great. We deserve and want the opportunities, but those opportunities are not resulting in the equity and outcomes that we need for our children and for our community.
Thank you so much, Dr. Osgood. I want to go to Ms. Arenberg Seltzer to talk about the work that the Children's Services Council has been doing, not only what you do all the time, but especially in this pandemic, to help and assist our educators and our children that are, a lot of them that are really struggling and face being left behind in all of this.
Thank you, Neki, and thank you to the committee for including me in this important discussion. The Children's Services Council was created by the voters of Broward County 20 years ago this year. And our mission is to ensure that all children have the opportunity to succeed. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, the screen went weird for a moment. That we provide the leadership, advocacy, and resources to ensure that all children can succeed. And I've had the amazing good fortune to be the CEO for those 20 years. Our commitment has been to help bridge this gap throughout our tenure. But 6 years ago, we really understood that while children who were in the programs that we were funding, which include programs to help children succeed in school, whether it be in pre-K, subsidized childcare, elementary school, middle and high school, that they were doing really well in the programs, but that there was something else happening in the community. And we made a commitment to addressing racial equity. and have been leaders along with the county and the school board in the Broward Partners for Racial Equity. During this pandemic, specifically to your question, Neki, we have been working in ensuring that food is available in communities that have not been able to be reached by the district. When schools opened virtually, we brought all of the non-school board funders together to look for ways to open pods, learning pods during those early days. And that was helpful for some of those parents who needed to work and some of the children who would learn better collectively. We're also continually handing out personal protective equipment and information on resources available to the community and much more, but I'll stop there for now.
Thank you so much. And I want to go to Mr. David Watkins. You know, as you can contribute to what Dr. Osgood had so much to say about equity and equality in the school system. Talk about the work you're doing.
Well, I'd like to thank you for everyone for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. You know, it's so important that we understand the history of the communities that we serve. It's important that we understand the generational conditions that have influenced the conditions of our communities and how they show up in our school system today. You know, as we acknowledge the historical contributions of our historic high schools, such as Addix High School, Blanche Ely High School, and Dillard High School, we know that that has also been influenced by the structural and institutional racism that existed over time, the forced redlining, the historical redlining that, you know, contributes to the concentration of communities that created Carver Ranches and West Park, Collier City and Pompano, or Northwest Fort Lauderdale. And the goal ultimately is to dismantle racism that has been created over history and embed equity in all aspects of our school system. So in short, making sure that our schools are culturally competent, that we infuse culturally responsive practices, teaching practices, and ensuring that our mandates around racial equity are infused in our schools, in our classrooms throughout the year.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Watkins. We also have we have Rudy Jean-Bart from Broward College joining into this conversation. You've heard what Mr. Watkins and then Ms. Osgood has to say about, you know, our secondary and primary education systems. Talk about what's going on at the college level.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be on this panel. So for Broward College specifically, in the light of what happened to George Floyd and so many others, unfortunately, we created the Advisory Council for the Advancement of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which I am the chair of. And what we've recognized is that it is multi-layered, right? There's the aspect of inside of the classroom. What can we add to the curriculum? What ways can professors better engage their students of all backgrounds, but in particular people of color, in order to help with the achievement gap? Then there's the aspect of employment, right? I think a lot of times in this racial equity discussion, what gets lost is, well, what is the state of Black and Brown folk who work in these institutions, who work in their schools, right? Do they feel empowered to teach the way that they want to teach? Do the employees and the staff feel empowered and feel as though that they themselves are not victims of prejudice? And then it's also about creating economic opportunities for our students of Black and Brown backgrounds, right? And so those are the areas of which we're creating a focus. The other thing, though, that we take note of is that it's not just about training. Training has been talked about in previous panels. Training is a starting place. It's about building a culture of racial equity. Too often, we're not looking at racial equity through the lens of a 400-year context. If we see it as merely a strategic issue, then we're going to approach it with strategy. Nothing's going to be. We recognize that America in and of itself has a racist history, and we're honest about that. And then we go find ways to kind of counteract that racism and this belief that Black and Brown students are intellectually inferior, and reshape that whole conversation and narrative and have it where the educators have a culture of racial equity and staff has a culture of racial equity, and then it's embedded into our practices as an institution, then we find ourselves in a much better place.
Thank you so much. I wanted Mr. Halisi of the United Negro College Fund, I'd like you to add to the conversation.
Good morning, and thank you to the MLK committee, and good morning to my esteemed panelists. So, you know, as we join here together on this MLK holiday, I don't think it would be fitting if someone didn't quote Dr. King, right? And so I'm sure you've heard many quotes today. I'd like to add to that conversation. In his letter from a Birmingham jail, Dr. King said, "We will reach the goal of freedom in Birmingham and all over the nation, because the goal of America is freedom. Abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up with the destiny of America. Before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock, we were here. Before the pen of Jefferson scratched across the pages of history, the majestic words of the Declaration of Independence, we were here." And so with that quote, I'd like to say that, you know, African-American success or failure is indeed American success or failure. So what do we know? We know that India and China has more honor students than America has students. We know in 2006, the US graduated about 1.3 million students. India graduated 3.1 million. China graduated 3.3 million. Of those 3.3 million college graduates in China, 100% of them spoke English. And so if we're going to compete on this global stage in this 21st century economy, we have to invest in the success of African-American students. Their success or failure, as I said, is American success or failure. And if we don't do that, we will fall behind as a nation. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. We have a question in the chat, and a reminder to everyone participating here today, this is your conversation, so please chime in. This question from Mr. Eichenberg is, every time there's a discussion about education, everyone talks about access to AP and other advanced academic offerings. My question is, why hasn't the same energy been dedicated on returning vocational offerings in our schools? We've heard the governor talk about in the last year, more work on the Space Coast. I've seen more vocational programs popping up around the area. I mean, full disclosure, it's hard to find a good plumber or electrician. I mean, and I know a lot of people can relate. How do we feel about more of those vocational options being offered in the schools? I'm going to go to Mr. Watkins and Dr. Osgood for that.
Well, I think, first of all, we have to know what we have in our schools. We changed Arthur Ashe to a vocational center. In Broward County schools, we have very robust vocational programs where children and adults can go for vocational training, whether it's at Arthur Ashe, whether it's at McFadder. We have some of the leading nursing programs where students are dual enrolled. When they graduate high school, all they have to do is pass a test for a nursing certification. We have our CTASE programs. We have manufacturing programs at Board Anderson. I think one of the problems we have at the district is we need to do a better job marketing and exposing the community to the programs that we have. A lot of times when I'm in conversations about schools and what's available in schools, we kind of relate it to the times when we were in school. But we've done a good job under Mr. Runce's leadership with magnet programs, with technical programs. We have Cambridge now in I know in all of our high schools in District 5, which is if you graduate with the Cambridge diploma, you automatically qualify for Bright Future. And I'm going to ask Mr. Watkins if he would come and talk more specifically about some of the technical programs and relationships we have. I know one we just started over the last couple of years with Broward College to have a pipeline to their new aviation education and training that they have there. Mr. Watkins?
So yes, one of the things that, Broward County has been fortunate to take great pride in is the number of industry certifications that we have awarded to our students. We lead the state in the number of industry certifications that have been awarded in a variety of areas, from construction to technology, science, and to a lot of different areas. However, we continue to partner and find new ways of engaging students. So one of the things that we are doing is we've partnered with the National Science Foundation as an initiative around historically Black colleges and universities, where we are increasing and we're working to increase the number of students who are earning an industry certification in computer science. But that also comes with making sure that teachers are trained to facilitate and deliver the kind of technical careers that can be available to kids. So not only are we scaling the amount of access for kids, we're also scaling that access for teachers. And so as we partner with different colleges and universities around initiatives to increase African-American access to it, we also address in the community around the perceptions and stereotypes of what it means to pursue a vocational career as opposed to going to a traditional college or university and getting a bachelor's degree in a different area. So, you know, a lot of that, as Dr. Osgood shared about marketing and really changing the narrative of the value of a career industry is very important. And it's something that under the leadership of our superintendent, we've been very aggressive with pursuing.
And I'll just add real quickly, we also have programs at Broward, Anderson, and Plantation in partnerships with municipalities because of the shortage on people of color working in EMS, where our students are working and serving as cadets, where they're working with the firefighters and the fire departments. And once they graduate and become of age, they can take the certification, and the municipalities have agreed to give them employment and to hire them. I know we have it at Broward, Anderson, Plantation, and Coral Springs. So there are some very phenomenal things that we're doing, and we're looking to level up and do more.
Thank you so much for highlighting that. We know there's great information out there. Ms. Seltzer, did you want to say, Ms. Arenberg, Seltzer, did you want to add to this?
Yes, I just wanted to say that also through the after-school programs at the Children's Services Council in the middle and high schools, which we just expanded dramatically going into this year, we have success coaches now that are really focused. I saw the question was about the at-risk students, and we are really recruiting those at-risk or at-promise students who look like they might get turned out of school, and matching them with success coaches, much smaller ratios than the district is able to do. And they are exposing them to a lot of different careers. It's hard to pursue a career if you don't even know it exists, or a vocation, whatever it happens to be. So if your world is really small and you only think there's 3 or 4 things you can do, you're not going to aspire to do it. And so we're trying to expose them to careers in the marine sciences or the marine industries. There's so many things that you can do. Aviation, as he said, but also a whole host of vocations.
Fantastic. Go ahead, Mr. Halisi.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on what my colleague from the Children's Services Council just said, I think when this question comes up, it usually comes up as an either or. Are we promoting vocational education, or are we promoting college-going culture? And I think what we found is that students, particularly minority students, given the opportunity, they will succeed. At UNCF, our primary barrier has been financial. And so if you give a student a scholarship, particularly in their freshman year, if you give a $1,500 scholarship to a student, that increases their graduation rate by 70 percentage points. So inherent in that vocational question, because it comes up on all of these panels that I sit on, is that it's not really an either or, because we know the 21st century jobs are computer-based, they're STEM-based. And so we really need to recognize that our students have the potential to participate in all those educational opportunities. Like she said, they just need exposure to these different majors, and they will succeed given the opportunity.
And I would like to add to that quickly, just because I find, to the point that my cohort just made mention of, a lot of times that question is brought up when we're talking about students of color. And it's somewhat similar to when we're talking about whether or not, for example, a basketball player should have to go to college in order to go pro. And that conversation only seems to happen around students of color. And I'm not anti-vocational schools at all. I just want to pose the question, have we really exhausted the educational opportunities for children of color, right? Is there an assumption that is being made that children of color are academically inferior and therefore inherently less prepared or unable to attack an academic career through the college route? And I just kind of want to, throw a little bit at that to have us really consider, why is it often brought up when we're discussing children of color, but not brought up when we're discussing children of the majority race?
I'd like to add an amen to my colleague's comment.
I know. That is so important. I think the comment that also came up was I know like so many students, I knew I was headed to college, but I needed extra skills to help pay for it. Now with all of these wonderful questions, Dr. Osgood, I know, and all the panelists, all the information about vocational schools, the information about services are all on your websites. I'm going to drive everyone asking, because someone in the question asked, where can students find out about the different vocations? And I know mental health, we keep coming back to that. I know my daughter has struggled in this, but a lot of students have really struggled. What's doing now during the pandemic and beyond to help with the mental health struggles during this? They've seen their parents lose their jobs, they've lost loved ones. To help our students make it to next year or even catch up?
So we've integrated mental health. First, I want to pause a moment and recognize Mr. Keith Coing, who I see is on with the Broward workshop, a major supporter of the work at Broward County Schools, very involved. In Broward schools, we have integrated mental health across all of our curriculums, our programs, our activities. But one of the challenges we're having right now is making sure that students are engaged in learning face-to-face or online 100% of the time. We have a large number of students that have 15 or more absences. We have a large number of students that have not engaged at all. So when we talk about becoming an anti-racist society and dealing with systemic racism, we have to own it as people of color to prioritize education. Children's education has to become more important than getting our hair done, getting our nails done, and all of those things are important. But when we talk about the United Negro College Fund and they have to beg us for money and they continue to struggle, and our children go to school for 1 or 2 years and they're back home simply because they don't have the money, or they take out all of these student loans that's going to ruin them financially, I think we have to start at a different place overall in the conversation as people of color. If we're going to get serious about education, it can't just be left up to the school district. We can't do it on our own. Right. We have to start early, making sure that we have resources in place for our children to get opportunities for education, whatever that education looks like, whether it's traditional college, which when we get an opportunity, we blow it out of the box. I mean, we're all celebrating Dr. Kizzy right now, who is an African-American woman that's a part of creating the vaccine to the coronavirus. We see the results that we get. And then we also want our children to have technical skills and trade skills. I know plenty of my friends, have master's degrees, but they can also do hair as a part of an entrepreneur. So I think that it all has to blend together, but I think we as a community have to start this conversation at a different place where we start prioritizing education, we start investing in institutions around education, we start educating our own kids. I remember when I was growing up, most churches had a school attached to the church, and you had to do certain things, or you got a few scriptures, belts, and rulers that help you get in line. So I think the whole way when we talk about systemic racism in the systems of education, the theory of change has to start with us creating another structure that can be used as a best practice. What we continue to do is take what other people give us as best practices, and they don't work for us. We end up, again, with major disparities in outcomes. And I'm going to keep going there because equity is good, but it's not enough. We have to deal with racism. We have to deal with systemic structures that are strategically in place to get better results for some students and other results. Right now, we're coming out of pandemic. Nobody is raising an alarm about what we're going to do with test results. If the governor used those test results as business as usual, we will have the highest retention rate of students ever. And it will be devastating to their self-esteem. Yes, we need a measurement. We need a baseline where we know where we are. We don't need those test results to be punitive where it's tied to teachers' evaluations. Schools have been disrupted for over 10 months now, and it's having a major impact on our babies. Even those babies that are higher achievers, that have high GPAs, we see the slide in the attrition. So right now we know that we're going to have an aggressive summer plan going on, and we need all the community organizations to come to the table with us, to engage, to work with us, that we're working with our kids in a way that we're going to help them build and gain back some of the attrition that has taken place over the last 10 months. We're in a crisis right now in education, family. I'm not going to sit here and just celebrate Martin Luther King without telling you the truth. We're in a crisis with our kids. The pandemic has had a major impact on our kids, and we have to come together and do something to address it, to catch them up, that they can go on to college and career and be successful, and not deal with the stigma and the residue of this pandemic forever.
That's what Dr. Osgood, thank you. That's a great place. Dr. Okay, Ms. Arenberg, Seltzer, real quickly, I'll let you wrap up before we move on, but that was a perfect, we all have to take personal responsibility for moving our kids forward. Go ahead, Ms. Arenberg.
We have to take responsibility, and we have to recognize and be a little kind to our children too. Dr. Osgood is absolutely right in the panic and concern that we need to feel for our children. Neki, you mentioned you have a 13-year-old. I have a 14-year-old. I've seen what this has done, and they're trying. They're doing their best. So there is going to have to be some look at what happens. We can't ignore as a society that this year, pretend that this was just a normal year and every child should have made gains like you would have expected at a normal time. And just one last thing before, back to your question about mental health. I really want to encourage anyone who's listening to remember 211. The number 211 is the key to getting connected to services. We talked earlier about telehealth when it came to physical health. There's a lot of telehealth when it comes to mental health as well, and we all need it. Take advantage. There are lots of things. It's not necessarily a one-on-one with a therapist unless that's what you want, but there's a lot of work being done through the Center for Mind-Body Medicine. The school is all in, the Children's Services Council is all in. You can learn tools to help yourself with coping. We're all struggling. There's no shame in it. Thank you.
Absolutely. We have to get rid of the stigma and remove the stigma and work together. Thank you so much, our panelists, not only for being here today, but for the work you do every day for our children. I hope everyone is empowered by their calls to action. Coming up next, we're going to recognize some really special people on this day who continue to trailblaze in the spirit of Dr. King. I'm going to turn it back over to the moderator.